When scientist Elizabeth Driscoll brings home a mysterious flower to show it to her boyfriend, it quickly transforms into an alien and replaces the boyfriend. Now, Elizabeth has to deal with a clone of her boyfriend who has gone cold, distant, and weird. And to make it worse, this is only the beginning of an invasion by a parasitic race of aliens, determined to replace all humans and take over Earth. This is the plot of one of the greatest horror movies from the 70s, which unfortunately has become rather forgotten, but it doesn't have to be this way. In this video, we will explore the top 10 70s horror movies that deserve a modern reboot. We're anyway living in a period where movies as old as Nosferatu are getting reboots and remakes, so why not reboot these 10 gems? With that in mind, let's get started. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Sentinel, 1977. The Sentinel, directed by Michael Winner, is a controversial horror film that ought to be metaphorically excavated from obscurity and given a new lease on life. While not entirely forgotten, it has faced harsh criticism for its story incoherence and troubling moral undertone. Despite these flaws, the film offers a glimpse into the apocalyptic despair of the post-Vietnam Watergate 1970s, with its overcast depiction of New York City serving as an atmospheric backdrop for a grim, nihilistic tale. Thematically, The Sentinel critiques institutional corruption, patriarchal power, and sexual repression, but its approach often undermines its own potential. In the movie, Allison Parker, a fashion model haunted by past suicide attempts tied to childhood trauma, moves into a Brooklyn Heights brownstone. The building's only other resident is Father Halloran, a blind priest who spends his days staring out his window. Strange occurrences plague Allison, including fainting, insomnia, and unnerving encounters with bizarre neighbors like Charles Chazin and a disturbing lesbian couple, Gertie and Sandra. After attending a surreal birthday party for Chazin's cat, she learns from the rental agent that the building is otherwise unoccupied. Her boyfriend, Michael, hires a corrupt detective, Brenner, to investigate. Allison later sees the corpse of her abusive father in her apartment and escapes by stabbing him, leading to a breakdown and hospitalization. Detectives Gatz and Rizzo, investigating the scene, uncover connections to Michael's possible murder of his wife and discover the strange truth: Allison's neighbors are deceased murderers. Meanwhile, Allison experiences eerie phenomena, including the ability to read unseen Latin text. Seeking clarity, she visits a church and confesses her sins, including her affair with Michael, to Monsignor Franchino. Michael uncovers a church file revealing Halloran is part of a succession of priests and nuns, all former suicide attempts, tasked with guarding Hell's Gateway in the brownstone. Allison is chosen as the next Sentinel. Confronted by Chazin and demons in the brownstone, Allison faces Michael, now a demon himself. Halloran, mortally wounded, hands her a cross. Allison accepts her role as the new Sentinel, saving her soul and repelling the demonic forces. The brownstone is demolished, replaced by modern apartments. A reclusive blind nun, Allison, now watches from a window, fulfilling her eternal duty as guardian of Hell's Gate. The casting of real-life, physically deformed people as demons has drawn significant criticism. Critics like Robin Wood have labeled this choice offensive, equating physical deformity with evil. While the actor's agency in accepting these roles complicates the ethical debate, the film perpetuates harmful stereotypes rooted in medieval religious dogma. Its view of sexuality is equally problematic, portraying lesbianism and other expressions of desire as predatory. Despite its shortcomings, The Sentinel has a bleak, apocalyptic tone characteristic of 1970s horror. It reflects a pervasive distrust of institutions, but unlike masterpieces such as Rosemary's Baby or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it lacks clarity and finesse. Winner's direction, coupled with Jeffrey Konvitz's derivative screenplay, results in a muddled critique of societal decay. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978. An amorphous alien species, escaping its dying planet, arrives on Earth as seed pods with pink flowers. Elizabeth Driscoll, a scientist at the San Francisco Health Department, takes one home and shows it to her boyfriend, Jeffrey. The next morning, Jeffrey behaves coldly and is seen disposing of the flower's remains. Alarmed, Elizabeth confides in her colleague, Matthew Bennell, suspecting that Jeffrey is no longer himself. She recounts following Jeffrey to secretive meetings with strangers. Matthew advises her to consult his psychiatrist friend, David Kibner. On their way, a frantic man warns them of danger before being pursued by an emotionless mob. At Kibner's book event, Elizabeth meets him, and he dismisses her concerns as psychological. Meanwhile, Matthew reconnects with his friends Jack and Nancy Belichick. At their mud spa, the Belichicks discover a half-formed replica of Jack's body. When Matthew inspects it, he realizes something sinister is happening. He returns to Elizabeth's apartment and finds her incomplete duplicate growing near her bed. He rescues her, but the authorities and Kibner dismiss his warnings. The group discovers the alien pods create emotionless duplicates of people as they sleep. The replicas aim to replace humanity for their survival. As pod control spreads, the group hides at Matthew's apartment, but soon flees when they realize Kibner is also a duplicate. Jack and Nancy distract the pod people, sacrificing themselves, while Matthew and Elizabeth escape to the health department. There, sedatives are used on them, but Matthew kills Kibner's double and flees with Elizabeth. Their attempts to mix with the pod people fail when Elizabeth screams at a hybrid. Separated from Nancy, they discover a warehouse shipping pods worldwide. Elizabeth, exhausted, falls asleep and disintegrates as her duplicate emerges. Devastated, Matthew burns the warehouse but ultimately succumbs to the inevitable. The film ends with Matthew, seemingly transformed, standing emotionless. Nancy approaches him, only for him to emit the pod people's horrifying scream, exposing her humanity. Philip Kaufman's Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a masterful remake. It updates the 1956 original with nuanced scares and rich emotional textures, reflecting the paranoia of 1970s America. Donald Sutherland gave a memorable performance, supported by Veronica Cartwright's emotional depth. While it lacks the original's tight pacing and allegorical ambiguity, it succeeds as an unnerving reinterpretation. The ending cements its place among great remakes, leaving an unforgettable impact. Martin, 1977. Martin, a young man who claims to be much older than his appearance suggests, arrives in Braddock, Pennsylvania to live with his elderly cousin, Tata Kuda. Martin believes himself to be a vampire, but rejects traditional myth. Instead of fangs or supernatural powers, he uses syringes and razor blades to subdue victims, rape them, and drink their blood. His journey begins on a train where he sedates and kills a woman. Upon his arrival, Kuda treats him as a traditional vampire, calling him Nosferatu and attempting to repel him with garlic and crucifixes. Martin mocks these efforts, while Kuda warns him against killing anyone in Braddock. Martin's life intertwines with his cousin's granddaughter, Christina, who is critical of Kuda's beliefs. Christina encourages Martin to seek psychiatric help, believing his behavior as psychological rather than supernatural. As Martin adapts to life in Braddock, he works at Kuda's grocery store and befriends Abby Santini, a lonely housewife. He confides in a radio DJ about his longing for normal intimacy and his struggles with his predatory urges. Abby and Martin begin an affair, which temporarily reduces his need for blood. Martin continues his violent acts outside Braddock, targeting a couple and killing a man while sparing his female companion. He later terrorizes Kuda by dressing as a stereotypical vampire, mockingly exposing the absurdity of Kuda's beliefs. Meanwhile, Christina grows weary of Kuda's oppressive household and leaves to live with her boyfriend. Abby's suicide devastates Martin, triggering suspicion from Kuda, who believes Martin killed her. Acting on his conviction, Kuda stakes Martin through the heart, burying him in a flower bed. Radio callers, oblivious to Martin's fate, continue discussing the Count, while Kuda places a crucifix on Martin's grave. George Romero's Martin is a thought-provoking reinterpretation of vampire lore set in a decaying steel town. Stripping the myth of supernatural elements, the film portrays Martin as a disturbed young man navigating alienation and violence. The stark contrast between Martin's imagined black and white fantasies and his grim reality highlights the film's exploration of trauma, faith and societal decay. Romero's decision to frame the story ambiguously, leaving Martin's vampirism unresolved, elevates the story, forcing viewers to grapple with its psychological and moral complexity. Romero crafts a subdued yet unsettling horror atmosphere, blending social commentary with moments of raw violence. The Pittsburgh setting, with its desolate landscapes, enhances the film's pervasive sense of despair. John Amplas was awesome as Martin. The supporting cast, particularly Lincoln Mazel as the rigid Cuda and Elaine Nadeau as the compassionate yet tragic Abby, adds depth to the story. While its pace can feel slow, Martin rewards patient viewers with its layered storytelling and unsettling tone. It defies conventional horror tropes, creating a deeply human and disturbing portrait of a fractured psyche.
Woody?
Tourist Trap, 1979. Eileen and her boyfriend Woody are stranded in a remote area after their car gets a flat tire. Woody leaves to find help and stumbles upon a seemingly deserted gas station. Inside, an unseen force traps him as mannequins come to life. Amid flying objects, a metal pipe fatally impales him. Meanwhile, Eileen's friends, Becky, Jerry, and Molly, join her, and they set off in search of Woody. Their vehicle also breaks down near Slouson's Lost Oasis, a tourist trap owned by Mr. Slauson. Slauson offers help, but insists they visit his home to get tools. There, they see his waxwork figures, animated with eerie realism. Eileen investigates a nearby house against Slauson's advice and encounters mannequins and a masked stranger. She is strangled by her scarf and turned into a mannequin. Slauson lies about her disappearance, prompting Becky and Molly to search for her. Becky finds Eileen's mannequin and is captured by a masked man, later revealed to be Slauson. She wakes up in a basement with Jerry and another captive, Tina, who is murdered by Slauson's brother, Davy. Jerry attempts to escape, but is overpowered. Molly seeks help from Slauson, unaware he's a killer. He gives her a gun, but it fires blanks. Slauson captures her and restrains her to a bed. Becky and Jerry escape the basement, but are separated. Slauson kills Becky using a mannequin figure. Jerry tries to rescue Molly, but has been transformed into a mannequin himself. Molly, horrified and desperate, kills Slauson with an axe. Traumatized, she drives away the next morning with mannequin versions of her friends. Tourist Trap is a bizarre, atmospheric film that defies simple categorization. While marketed as a slasher, its unsettling tone and supernatural elements set it apart. The film borrows from classic horror, echoing Psycho with its isolated house and sinister backstory. The eerie use of mannequins creates moments of genuine unease, despite their lack of lifelike detail. Schmuller skillfully uses subtle movements and unsettling scenarios to give the mannequins a haunting presence. Chuck Connors did great as Slauson. His scenes, particularly one involving a victim's face being plastered over while he calmly describes her impending death, are disturbingly memorable. However, some effects, like the plaster application, lack polish and undercut the tension. Despite its shortcomings, the film sustains a strange, dreamlike quality amplified by surreal moments like mannequins coming to life or a victim realizing they have been transformed. While Tourist Trap shares tropes with the slasher genre, it avoids predictability with its supernatural twists and eerie atmosphere. The film's flaws, ranging from inconsistent effects to standard horror cliches, are offset by its unique, unsettling vision. Schmuller's ability to turn mannequins into effective symbols of horror makes this film a unique piece of work among unconventional horror entries. It's Alive, 1974. Frank and Lenore Davis, an ordinary Los Angeles couple, are excitedly expecting their second child. Frank is a public relations consultant, and Lenore is a stay-at-home mother to their son Chris. After avoiding pregnancy for years with contraceptive pills, Lenore finally gives birth in a hospital, but the child is born deformed, with claws and fangs. Moments after its birth, the baby massacres the medical staff in the delivery room and escapes through a skylight. Lenore, horrified, screams for her child, while Frank is left in shock. The police, led by Lieutenant Perkins, investigate the killing, and the media sensationalizes the tragedy. Frank and Lenore are thrust into the spotlight, resulting in Frank losing his job. Meanwhile, the infant roams the city, killing people, including a milkman, fueling public panic. Frank, denying the child as his own, collaborates with authorities and researchers to hunt and kill the baby. Pharmaceutical executives, aware that Lenore's contraceptive pills likely caused the mutation, manipulate events to cover their liability. The baby's trail leads to a school where Chris is a student. Frank arrives as the baby kills a police officer and escapes. Later, he discovers Lenore has been hiding the infant in their basement. Chris, having run away from his caretaker, confronts the baby and promises to protect it. Frank, initially aiming to kill the infant, hesitates when he sees its vulnerability. When the child escapes and kills Chris's caretaker, the police track it to the sewer. Frank finds the baby there and, recognizing its fear, apologizes and carries it out, wrapped in his coat. Outside the sewers, armed police confront Frank. Pleading for the baby's life, he asks the authorities to study it rather than kill it. As tensions rise, the baby leaps from Frank's arms to attack a fertility doctor who is urging its death. The police open fire, killing both the infant and the doctor. The Davises, devastated, leave the scene as Lieutenant Perkins learns of another similar mutant baby born in Seattle. Directed by Larry Cohen, the film's premise, centering on a monstrous infant, is both scary and emotionally resonant. John P. Ryan gives a solid performance as Frank, portraying a father torn between horror, denial, and reluctant acceptance. Cohen masterfully balances moments of terror with deeply human conflict, elevating the film beyond typical genre fare. The story critiques social and corporate ethics, with pharmaceutical culpability and media exploitation adding layers of commentary. Bernard Herrmann's haunting score amplifies the tension and underscores the film's emotional depth. Cohen's direction skillfully juxtaposes violence with moments of tenderness, crafting a story as unsettling as it is thought-provoking. While the film operates on a modest budget, its psychological depth and social relevance make it worth it. The imagery and visceral horror are matched by its examination of familial and societal rejection. It's Alive is not merely a monster movie. It's a nuanced exploration of fear, responsibility, and the blurred lines between humanity and monstrosity. Prophecy, 1979. Dr. Robert Verne, an EPA investigator, travels with his wife Maggie to a remote Maine town to mediate a conflict between a logging company and the local Native American tribe, the Opis. Maggie, secretly pregnant, fears revealing her condition due to Robert's opposition to having children. The town is rife with tension, with the logging company blaming the Opis for the disappearance of a search and rescue team and other bizarre incidents. The Opis, led by John Hawkes, attribute the chaos to Katadin, a vengeful forest spirit. The Vernes encounter troubling signs of ecological damage. Massive animals, deformed wildlife, and mercury-tainted environments linked to the paper mill's operation. The mercury, a mutagen, contaminates the ecosystem, including the fish Maggie has consumed. Hector Mray, a tribal leader, insists Katadin is real and a consequence of the logging industry's desecration. While Robert and Maggie investigate further, Katadin, a monstrous mutated bear, emerges, killing campers and terrorizing the area. After discovering mutated bear cubs at a campsite, the Vernes and Ramona, an Opie ally, take one alive. The cubs' deformities convince the authorities of the logging company's culpability. That night, Katadin attacks their camp, killing Sheriff Pilgrim. The group retreats into underground tunnels and later attempts to flee. Isley, the mill director, is killed by Katadin while seeking help. During another attack, Verne drowns the surviving cub to protect Maggie. Katadin continues her rampage, killing Hawks and destroying a lakeside cabin sheltering the group. Verne ultimately kills Katadin in a final battle, forcing her into the lake. As Verne and Maggie are evacuated by helicopter, another mutated bear, implied to be Katadin's mate, remains in the forest, suggesting the threat is far from over. John Frankenheimer's Prophecy delivers eco-horror drenched in 1970s environmental anxieties, but struggles to balance its themes with engaging execution. The film frames industrial pollution as the true villain, tying corporate negligence to the mutations plaguing the wilderness. While the story does offer a strong ecological critique, its shallow character development and clunky dialogue undermine the weight of its message. and the acting is uneven. Armand Assante shines as John Hawkes, imbuing his role with gravitas, while Talia Shire's Maggie is reduced to a stereotypical passive figure. Leonard Rosenman's overbearing score often misaligns with the film's tone, amplifying moments that fail to deliver genuine tension. Despite its flaws, Prophecy achieves an unsettling atmosphere, largely due to the design of its monstrous antagonist. Katahdin's half-mutated form becomes a visceral manifestation of nature's revenge, creating moments of genuine fear. Frankenheimer's direction crafts effective set pieces, such as the camp attack and final confrontation. Though the film falters with its lack of cohesion, Prophecy remains a curious artifact of eco-horror, compelling in its concept, but hampered by weak execution. Its imagery and environmental themes resonate, but its potential is overshadowed by clumsy storytelling. The Car, 1977. A mysterious matte black car terrorizes a rural Utah town, leaving a trail of death in its wake. It first targets two cyclists, crushing one against a bridge wall and throwing the other off it. It then brutally kills a hitchhiker and Sheriff Everett Peck, baffling the authorities. Chief Deputy Wade Parent assumes leadership of the investigation. Witnesses reveal that the car has no driver, deepening the mystery. Despite warnings, the local school marching band rehearses and narrowly escapes when the car attacks, chasing them into a cemetery. Curiously, the vehicle halts at the cemetery's edge, refusing to enter consecrated ground. The car continues its rampage, killing 5 deputies during a high-speed desert chase. Wade discovers that bullets cannot damage the car and that it has no visible door handle. The car retaliates against Wade's girlfriend, Lauren, driving through her house and killing her. Grief-stricken, Wade devises a plan to lure the car into a canyon rigged with dynamite. After a harrowing pursuit, Wade and his deputies succeed in their trap. As the car plummets into the canyon, the explosion reveals a demonic visage within the flames. Though some believe the car was destroyed, Wade remains skeptical. The film ends ominously with the car prowling the streets of Los Angeles. The Car is a bizarre mix of action and supernatural horror, something that has the suspense of the 1971 movie Duel with the malevolent force of The Exorcist. Ridiculed for its outlandish premise, the film is unexpectedly engaging, delivering thrilling action sequences and moments of genuine tension. The Car, a modified 1971 Lincoln Continental Mark III, serves as an evil antagonist, effectively carrying the film's horror elements. Scenes like the car leaping over squad cars or its taunting revs in Wade's garage are striking highlight. However, the human interactions lack depth, marred by weak humor and subpar performances. Attempts at light-hearted moments, such as Deputy John Rubinstein's antics, fall flat, contrasting sharply with the film's grim tone. Despite these flaws, the absence of subtext or over-explanation works in the film's favor, creating a stripped-down simplicity that complements its absurd premise. The car's inability to enter hallowed ground, coupled with its furious reactions, adds an oddly logical mystique to its character. The Brood, 1979. Dr. Hal Raglan, a psychotherapist, pioneers a controversial method called psychoplasmic, encouraging patients to manifest suppressed emotions as physical changes. One of his patients, Nola Carveth, is locked in a custody battle with her husband Frank over their 5-year-old daughter, Candace. After Frank discovers bruises on Candace following a visit with Nola, he threatens to end visitation rights. Raglan intensifies Nola's therapy to resolve the situation. Through these sessions, he learns about Nola's traumatic childhood, marred by her abusive mother, Juliana, and neglectful father, Barton. While Frank investigates Raglan's methods, Juliana babysits Candace, but is murdered by a deformed, dwarf-like child. Candace witnesses the attack, but remains unharmed. Barton returns for the funeral and demands to see Nola, but is turned away. Later, Barton is also killed by a similar creature, which Frank confronts and accidentally kills. An autopsy reveals the creature is asexually produced and has no natural birth traits, deepening the mystery. As the murders escalate, Raglan realizes the killings coincide with Nola's therapy session. He learns that Nola's suppressed rage, manifested through psychoplasmics, has parthenogenetically created a brood of violent, deformed children. These creatures act on her psychic commands, targeting anyone who angers her. After 2 of them murder Candace's teacher Ruth and abduct Candace, Frank pursues them to Raglan's Institute. Raglan, now desperate, asks Frank to calm Nola while he rescues Candace. Frank pretends to reconcile with Nola, but is horrified when he witnesses her giving birth to a new brood child through an external womb. Raglan attempts to save Candace, but is killed by the brood when Nola senses Frank's revulsion. In a final confrontation, Frank strangles Nola, severing the brood's psychic connection and killing them. He rescues Candace, who remains traumatized. As they leave, small lesions appear on Candace's arm, suggesting the cycle may continue. David Cronenberg's The Brood is an exploration of family trauma and the darker aspects of psychotherapy. By merging psychological horror with biological imagery, Cronenberg creates a deeply unsettling story where suppressed emotions take on physical, violent forms. The film's strength lies in its ability to link its body horror elements to the emotional scars of its characters, particularly Nola, whose unresolved rage literally births monsters. The film's climax is both shocking and disturbing, showcasing Cronenberg's mastery of tension and his knack for crafting iconic, haunting visuals. Samantha Egger's performance as Nola is mesmerizing, her unsettling portrayal adding depth to a character who is both victim and villain. Art Hindle as Frank anchors the story with his desperate attempts to protect his daughter amidst the chaos. The Brood's design amplifies the horror, transforming familial conflict into a visceral nightmare. Despite its brilliance, the film falters with uneven pacing and occasional lapses in tension. However, these flaws do little to diminish its impact. The Brood is a great work in Cronenberg's career. It's a defining example of the body horror genre, leaving a lasting, unsettling impression. A Bay of Blood, 1971. Countess Federica Donati, confined to a wheelchair, is strangled by her husband Filippo in their Bayside mansion. Moments later, Filippo is stabbed to death by an unknown assailant, and his body is dragged into the bay. The police find a forged suicide note from the Countess, but remain unaware of Filippo's murder. Real estate agent Frank Ventura and his lover Laura scheme to acquire the bay property. Collaborating with Filippo, they planned the Countess's murder, but are now unaware that Filippo is also dead. Meanwhile, 4 teenagers, exploring the seemingly deserted mansion, are brutally killed by Simon, the Countess's illegitimate son. Brunhilde is slashed with a billhook while swimming, Bobby's face is cleaved open, and Duke and Denise are speared mid-coitus. Simon, having killed Filippo, conspires with Ventura for a payout, but their plans are disrupted by Renata, Filippo's estranged daughter, who seeks her inheritance. Renata and her husband Albert plan to kill Simon, but find Filippo's corpse on Simon's boat. After a confrontation, Renata stabs Ventura with scissors. Witnessing the attack, Paolo Fossati tries calling the police, but is strangled by Albert. Renata then decapitates Fossati's wife Anna to eliminate witnesses. Simon, discovering Laura's role in his mother's death, strangles her. He's soon killed by Albert, who later finishes off the wounded Ventura. Believing themselves the sole heirs, Albert and Renata prepare to leave, but are shot by their son, mistaking their shotgun for a toy. The children, unaware of the truth, play innocently by the bay as their parents' bodies lie nearby. Mario Bava's Twitch of the Death Nerve is a foundational work in the slasher genre, influencing its tropes with a series of inventive and gruesome murders. The film's sparse plot is secondary to its elaborate death scene, such as the spear impalement of 2 lovers, later echoed in Friday the 13th Part 2. Bava's ability to juxtapose serene imagery, like sunset-lit bays, with graphic violence creates a striking visual contrast, though the naturalistic lighting in night scenes occasionally obscures the action. The opening scene, where the Countess is murdered in her richly adorned home, sets a grim tone, combining elegance with brutality. Bava's cinematographic expertise is evident in his composition, though his overuse of zooms detracts from the tension. The characters, thinly sketched and largely unlikable, serve primarily as fodder for the film's inventive kills, with little effort made to develop their depth or motivation. The film's dark humor becomes more apparent in its later acts, as betrayals and murders escalate, culminating in a shocking and ironic conclusion. While loosely inspired by Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, the film focuses less on mystery and more on relentless carnage. The Blood on Satan's Claw, 1971. In 18th century England, farmer Ralph Gower discovers a deformed skull with an intact eye and fur. He notifies a local judge, but the skull vanishes before further investigation. The judge dismisses Ralph's fears as superstitions. Peter Edmonton brings his fiancée Rosalind Barton to meet his aunt, Mistress Banham, and the judge, both of whom disapprove of the match. Rosalind is placed in an unused attic room where she suffers a breakdown and attacks Banham, leaving her mysteriously ill. When Rosalind is committed, Peter glimpses a monstrous claw in place of her hand. Meanwhile, 3 children playing near a field find a claw linked to the deformed body. Mark, one of the children, is killed during a ritualistic game led by Angel Blake, the group's ringleader. Angel attempts to seduce the curate, Reverend Fallowfield, and later accuses him of molestation to divert suspicion. Mark's sister Kathy is lured by Angel's followers to a black mass. The children reveal patches of fur growing on their bodies, flayed to restore a demon named Behemoth. Kathy is murdered during the ritual, and her body is discovered by Ralph. Ralph rescues Margaret, a suspected witch, from a mob. A doctor removes fur from her leg, but she reveals allegiance to the demon and escape. The judge, returning to the village, interrogates Margaret, who exposes the cult's plan to complete the demon's resurrection. The judge leads a mob to the ruined church, where Ralph, partially transformed, awakens surrounded by the cult. Angel is killed in the ensuing chaos, and the judge slays the demon with a sword, lifting the curse and returning Ralph to normal. Blood on Satan's Claw offers a macabre tale of demonic resurrection framed within England's historical witch persecutions. Drawing inspiration from post-Rosemary's Baby occult horror and The Exorcist's supernatural themes, it combines folklore with visceral horror. The story, however, lacks coherence. Key characters like the judge disappear for stretches of the film, and the climax feels rushed. The plot, more a series of vignettes than a cohesive story, struggles to maintain focus, leaving its themes underdeveloped. Pierce Haggard directs with moments of eerie brilliance. Scenes like Claws emerging through floorboards or Angel Blake's seductive confrontation with Reverend Fallowfield exude genuine unease. Linda Hayden's performance as Angel is nearly perfect. Michelle Dontris as Margaret is impeccable, her fear palpable as she wrestles with the cult's influence. The film's atmospheric score enhances its scary moments, though some scenes suffer from a lack of story clarity. Despite its flaws, Blood on Satan's Claw remains a notable entry in the folk horror subgenre. Its evocative imagery and unsettling tone compensate for its fragmented story. And that was all in this one, folks. See you in the next one. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one. Be safe. Thanks, everyone.